Labor, peace, and baseball as the Christmas holidays start to settle in here on the Baseball Talk Radio Show with Rich and Gary. And hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show. It's a show that is a weekly show talking all about our favorite sport, and that, of course, is baseball. How you doing, Gary?
I'm doing good, Rich, and I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving out there, as well as you and your family. And as you said, we are now in the holiday spirit, heading right headlong into Christmas. So it's kind of Hanukkah and Festivus and whatever else people are celebrating nowadays.
Every holiday for the rest of us. Even.
That's right. So we're heading right towards it there, and now the Christmas shopping begins and all that kind of niceties, though I think some people are done already.
Yeah, the hustle bustle, the Christmas spirit, and that's what I've been feeling the last couple days out on the street. You know, you go out to the stores and all, people are a little bit more friendly around the holidays. They're opening the doors for you, saying thank you, please. The manners are very well. It's a great time of year, and again, yeah, we'd love to. We hope that you guys had a great holiday out there, our listeners, and we thank you for tuning into the podcast.
Certainly, and remember, if you're in a gift giving mood, go to our Patreon page and help out the show a little bit. Rich will give you the address a little bit later, I guess, but we really appreciate it. So if you're feeling a gift giving mood, and think about signing up to be a patron of the Baseball Talk Radio Show for this year.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate it. And of course, while we're talking about it, I'll give the address out. It's patreon.com. That's patreon.com/baseball talk. And there you'll find our page there on Patreon. It's sort of like a GoFundMe type of page where you can support artists and things like that. There's all kinds of independent filmmakers on Patreon. Different podcasts like the one you're listening to now, and a myriad of other people. There's authors there, basically people that like the arts and like to support the arts. So if you'd like to support the show, we'd certainly appreciate it. And we did add some nice gifts for your support. So you want to stop by that page. And of course, if you can't quite find it from what we're saying here on the podcast, you can always go to mlbthisweek.com. Where we park our show, our video show that we record along with the podcast. And I'll have a link there for you. It's patreon.com. It's a very nice site and it's very secure. I meant to mention that a couple times ago when I first started talking about being listener supported. They're very secure. They're almost like a bank website. So you can put your PayPal information there and not worry about it. It's just a small monthly donation. We're talking, whatever you'd like to throw at us, $1 or $2, $3. We'd certainly appreciate it. So, getting on with the news of baseball, Gary, we had a certainly full week, and it seems like we've been off for a month, even though it's been a week that we skipped.
Yes, and Rich, you mentioned it before, and that is labor peace. They came to an agreement at the practically the last hour. But signed a CBA, and not a lot of monumental changes here. They managed to keep a lot of the stuff that they had previously. They pulled some stuff off the table, and really some kudos to the owners who get the rap of being greedy, and to a certain extent they are, but I think both sides realize there's so much money at stake that we have to be realistic about this and not try to be tough and kill the golden goose, if you will. The biggest thing really probably is that They raised the luxury tax threshold from 189 to 195, and that'll go up to 210 million at the final year of the agreement. It was a 5-year deal. They're going to increase some of the rates for the tax rates for the luxury tax if you go over, but it's going to be staggered as well. And let's see, they pulled the international draft. The owners were pushing for an international draft, and they pulled that off the table. They didn't. They were talking about changing roster sizes. They did not do that in this agreement. The All-Star game doesn't matter anymore, as they've decided to go with the best season record for the All-Star game. The pennant winner with the best season record will get the home field advantage for the World Series. And as I said, it wasn't a lot of groundbreaking stuff in this, but it got done, and they got it done right before the deadline. And that's probably the most important thing, that it is done, and there's labor peace for another 5 years, and that's great. One other thing they are changing is the draft pick compensation, the qualifying offers. They're still, details are still being finalized at that, but it's not going to be a first round pick anymore that you would lose if you make a qualifying offer. It'll be, I believe, a second and a third, or something like second and a third, or a second, and you can, a player can only be given a qualifying offer once in his career. So that's basically it. But it's the biggest thing is it's done. We have baseball, no lockouts, no stoppages of any sorts, and now the winter meetings come.
Yeah, it's really a surprise baseball made that agreement. They went down to the final few hours. I think 3 hours left before it was rumored that baseball would lock the players out. And that would have been a real disaster for baseball. If you can remember back, I believe, to 1994, when they had some labor disruption. A lot of fans sort of closed the book on baseball and never went back. And that would have been a real bad time for baseball. They would have cost themselves a lot of money, both sides, players and owners. And as you said, Gary, that they would have been crazy not to come to some sort of agreement and end up the way they did, even with some of the surprises that I was kind of surprised that the players were very against an international draft. It almost seemed like they sensed that their stock would go down a little bit with an international draft. But I think if you opened it up to more people, you may be getting the opposite effect. There might be so many good players that the better players will be getting more money, and the so-called average players will be getting more money. So I'm not sure why the players were against an international draft, but maybe that'll come out to light as well.
Well, I think part of it is a lot of these Latin American countries, they have a lot of these camps and stuff that have started, and they grab these kids at 10, 11, 12 years old and bring them into these camps. And some of them are really, how to put it, I mean, they work these kids like, the dogs or something. But they do get signed at an early age. A lot of these kids get signed at 15, 16. That would end. And I guess maybe some of the fringe players wouldn't get signed then, because they, if you had a draft, you'd see more of them. You would draft them at a later age. And maybe somebody that had a lot of potential at 15 might not have the same potential at 17. So it's all about money. And apparently they felt very strong about that. And, again, kudos to the owners to not try to stick to this and make it a sticking point, but to pull back and say, okay, we want to get this deal done, so we're going to pull that back off the table. And with it, I think, came the roster changes and whatnot. And I think part of the roster changes, they were a little concerned that if they increased it to 26 players, they'd add somebody to the bullpen, and that means more bullpen changes, and the pace of game issue comes into that. So, but I'm a little surprised. I thought really that they would increase the rosters and decrease the September roster, which kind of makes sense. Though what I would consider if they were going to increase the roster is this. I would do something like increase the active roster to say do something like hockey does or some of the other sports where you can have 27 players, but you can only dress for the series those 25, something along that line. And then now, again, take out the whole pace of play thing because uh, if you that means you wouldn't have to dress all your starting pitchers, but then you could add relief pitches, which would probably slow the game down anyway. But I don't know, something along that lines would be more interesting for me. I would think to have guys that are healthy scratches, as they say in hockey, that don't dress for those particular games, and but they're going to keep it the same. So
And another interesting aspect of the international type of player, on a different light, there, the international player age, irrespective of Cuban players, they were given an
mhm.
opt out on this. They would have to be 25 years of age or more to be into the MLB. So that's kind of strange. They gave the Cuban players an in if they were under 25, but if you came from, say, Japan or somewhere else like that, you'd have to be 25 years of age to be drafted. So I think the players are a little afraid of an international expansion of baseball, and that seems to be the way baseball seems to want to start to move towards, so to speak.
Well, and I think they shouldn't be afraid. Only because it's only going to enrich the game more. The more you audience that you have, the players may be a little afraid, as you say, because of the pool of players would increase, perhaps. But I think for the good of the game, it can't do anything but help the game. And I went to that World Baseball Classic qualifier that they had in Brooklyn, and it was fascinating to see uh, just how like Team Israel and Team Pakistan, and then to read about how these sports are, how the sport of baseball is growing in these countries, and that can be nothing but good for the game. I'm sure someday we'll see an international team, and I know we have one now, the Toronto Blue Jays, and we had the Montreal Expos, but I mean a truly international, be it in Europe or um, somewhere in Latin America. I think it can help but come because you're just running out of places in the United States, and with all of the districts that they line up for the teams, and you can't put a team in here, and because it's in my zone and all that, they're going to either have to get rid of that or they're going to have to expand internationally and beyond Canada. Let's just say, because we think Canada as North America. So I know it's another country. Please, no emails on that. I know it's considered international, but I think a European team perhaps might be on the horizon sometime. Maybe not in our lifetime, but I think it's going to happen eventually.
Yeah, and the other aspect of the contract supposedly going to be ratified is the free agency compensation rule. No longer will first round draft picks be forfeited as part of free agent compensation. Now, I kind of like that. If your team happened to have a big free agent and he did not sign with your team, you would be awarded a first round draft pick in most instances. With your team. But now, after this start of the 2017 season, that draft pick will come out of the lower rounds. And it doesn't really make sense to me. A team that is over the luxury tax threshold will be required to provide a second through fifth round pick from the draft, and clubs that do not exceed that luxury tax threshold, rather, would forfeit a third round draft pick. So you're no longer going to see that nice draft pick being awarded to your team if you lose a top flight free agent. So that's a little bit of a surprise to me that the players would agree to that, and the owners.
I think well, as far as the owners go, I don't, it's less money they got to lay out. But I think that it's compromised. They took off the international draft and they got this instead. That it was because they don't want to give up a first round draft pick, so they got the that off the table, and in turn they took off the international draft that they wanted. So it all worked out. I don't think anybody you could say is a winner or a loser. I think this was a good deal for everybody. I think there's so much money to be made in this game, and I think at least it's fascinating to really get the idea that the union is finally getting it after all these years where we had labor strife and the newer fans don't know what we're talking about, because if you're past the age of under the age of 30, you don't remember when there was a labor strike. So and we didn't have baseball, so it's not fun, folks, to go a whole summer without the game of baseball. But I think they both came to the realization that, hey, there's a lot of money in this game to be made, and if we fight over picayune things, there's not going to be any money to be made, and we're going to hurt the brand. And I think we're in a whole new world now, Rich. Everything is the brand, and they're selling a brand, and that's Major League Baseball.
Yeah, there was another interesting part of that contract, the qualifying offer system. Teams that lose a free agent who rejects a qualifying offer, and by the way, they upped the time. It used to be 7 days that they could reject or accept a qualifying offer. I think they pushed that out to 10 days now. Those teams that lose someone that opts to go free agent and not accept their qualifying offer will still get a draft pick, but most of the time that will be a lower round as well. The 15 smallest markets in baseball will receive a free agent pick that is following the first round. So things get a little worse for the teams that can't keep these big players, that opt to go and leave their team and not accept these qualifying offers. Of course, I believe the minimum amount is $17.2 million that they have to offer these players right now, or else they can go to free agency and find their own deal. But I think in that respect, a lot of the lower market teams will now suffer because they're not going to get the better pick that they used to get if they lose a free agent that happens to come up with a team and play well for them for a few years, but maybe for one reason or another, they can't afford to pay them. Now they're not going to get that better pick. So in that respect, I think the teams with the lower money totals lost out a little bit.
Well, we'll have to see how it plays out. Did they get a sandwich pick or?
Yeah, that's the thing. Everything hasn't been hashed out.
Yeah.
It does say the details of it in this article that I read. For most teams, that pick would be a sandwich pick immediately following the competitive balance picks that are awarded after the second round. So what kind of a high type of pick are you going to get after that second round? That's the question. Of course, there might be a diamond in the rough somewhere, but you're not going to get those top flight type players that are already going to be gone.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting. We won't know the impact for a couple years down the road with these new rules. Of course, they last for 5 years. And as you said, there's been some interesting changes as well. No smokeless tobacco from players who accept for current players, active players, they would be grandfathered in. That's an interesting one there. And of course, drug and domestic violence policies. That's always a sort of a rule that gets changed from time to time, and the fine print isn't out on that either. But yeah, at least we're going to have baseball. I'm happy about it.
And the disabled list has been changed too from 15 to 10 days. So that should be interesting. Minor leagues do a 7-day disabled list. And I think Major League has it for a concussion now, 7 days. But now they lower it because, sometimes a guy gets a little mild strain and then you lose him for 2 weeks. This way, it's only going to be a week and a half. And that could be a big improvement too to the game. So, like you said, Rich, it's got to shake out. We don't know all the final details yet. They do have an agreement in principle, and we're going to have baseball, and I think that's the bottom line.
It won't be long till we're talking spring training here. Of course, winter has to settle in, so we will have some cold times to deal with before we think of spring.
So, Rich, say it ain't so.
One of our colleagues has been tweeting and saying how much he enjoys the cold winter of Minnesota, and we wish him well there with that. We love to see those pictures of the snow falling, the ice, and they can just have all that they want over there in Minnesota.
That's right, Frank. Frank Conti was working for the Twins and went from Miami or close to Miami, Jupiter. I think he lived in Florida. Came to New York in the summertime, and then got this job in Minnesota, and he's loving the snow. Well, Frank, if you're listening, you can have it, buddy. Keep it there in the Minnesota and Twin Cities, and keep it away from us here.
That's why they call it Minnesota. Well, moving on with the podcast, we'd like to invite you to follow our Twitter feed. And you can find us at MLB This Week right on Twitter. You can find out when our latest shows are, some news that we put across that you might want to follow us. And even our Facebook page coming up for the Baseball Talk Radio Show. We'd like to invite you there as well. So plenty of ways to connect with us here. Of course, our website at mlbthisweek.com. You can find the latest YouTube videos. And if you want to subscribe to us, you can go to iTunes and get our shows every time we release them, usually every week, even in the off season. And Gary's been rustling up the leaves and finding us some authors. We're knee deep and up to our hips in books already, thanks to Gary.
Well, you're welcome, Rich. Yeah, hopefully we're going to have some great guests on. Just talking baseball too. Reading a terrific book that's coming out. I don't know if it's coming out this year or in next year, but it's on Leo Durocher. And anybody knows that Rich and I are like, we love the history of the game. We like a lot of these old-time players, and Leo Durocher is a guy that spanned from Babe Ruth to Tom Seaver. I mean, played with Babe Ruth and some of those classics and the Gas House Gang in St. Louis, and went on to be a manager for many years, and in fact was the manager for the 51 Giants. We're going to have a little quick story about them in a second, and the Dodgers in that playoff game, and was there when Jackie Robinson came in 1947. So really colorful, I wouldn't say A+ citizen, but colorful character of the game of baseball. And I'm a great believer that if you're a baseball fan, you should really read about the history of the game, because there's tons of interesting stuff there and interesting people, and go check it out. But Rich, if just mentioned about Leo DeRocha, and one of the guys in one of the biggest dramas of baseball and one of the biggest moments in baseball history, the shot heard around the world, passed away just recently, and that's Ralph Branca, the big right-handed pitcher who threw the pitch that Bobby Thompson hit, the famous shot heard around the world that won the 51 pennant for the New York Giants. Remember Russ Hodges' call, the Giants win the pennant, the Giant win the pennant. Well, Ralph Branca passed away. I believe he was 89 years old. Interestingly enough, he was the father-in-law of Bobby Valentine, the former major league manager of the Mets in Texas and a couple other teams, and a former major league ball player as well. So our condolences go out to the Branca Valentine family, and he had a good long life, and really learned to it was such a devastating moment it had to be when Thompson hit that home run, and to embrace it. And him and Thompson became very good friends, and started doing card shows and that sort of thing together in their later years. Practically made a career out of it. So I guess it's heartbreaking at the time, but you adjust and you move on, and we see a lot now of Mookie Wilson and Billy Buckner doing stuff together. So maybe they've been able to embrace that as well. And look, if it keeps you in the focus and you can make a few dinero on the side there with doing it, why not?
Absolutely. And yeah, as you said, that's part of the history of the game. A lot of our listeners are so young, they may not have even heard of the shot that was heard around the world. I grew up with baseball in the 70s, basically. So yeah, that was way before my time. But over the years, I have saw the story. I subscribed to a trading card magazine several years ago with sports cards, and one of their promotions were, if you signed up with them for the year, they gave you a Bobby Thompson autographed signed picture of the shot that was heard around the world. So I, of course, had to extend my subscription, and somewhere in my house here, I have that autograph, and it was a nice piece of memorabilia from that, I'm sure. But yeah, that's part of the great stories about the game of baseball that you always can talk about for years to come.
And now that he's passed as well, a couple of years ago, he passed away, Bobby Thompson. That's going to have some value to it, Rich. You better go start going through them boxes and find them.
Yeah, really. You never know what you're going to find. But yeah, that's the great part of baseball history. And of course, as we go on, history is made all the time. As Gary mentioned, there's some great baseball books out there. We'll be talking to some authors over the off season. Cubs fans, this one's for you. I know your Cubs have been successful. They won the World Series, but right after you get in the World Series, and especially when you win it, there's a deluge of books that come out about the whole process. I'm sure Gary knows with the Mets getting in just a year or so ago. You get a lot of exposure, a lot of great books, a lot to talk about, but go out and get some of those books, because they don't usually second print baseball books. You get one shot and you're usually done. You might find them at the $5 bargain book shop in a year or so, but once they go, they're very hard to replace. So my suggestion, go out and get yourself a book or two for the holidays.
I couldn't add anything to that, Rich. That's a great suggestion.
And especially if they're doing autographs with those books, because it's a nice time to meet the author, say a few words to him or so, and makes a great gift too. So if you know somebody that likes baseball, they're usually always going to be a reader of some sort and enjoy a book. So nice little holiday suggestion there from the podcast.
There you go. Little shopping guide.
Yep. And we want to invite you over to baseballtalkradio.com. It's the home of great baseball talk shows. A couple of shows just added in the past week to 10 days over the holiday there. A Washington Nationals podcast and a baseball only podcast. So check it out. We're up to 32, 33 shows now. The goal is to add plenty more. So maybe by the start of the season, we'll be up to 40 or 45 shows. So keep checking it out. BaseballTalkRadio.com. It's the home for great baseball talk shows.
And Rich, we mentioned it briefly a few minutes ago about the winter meetings starting. So the hot stove is warming up now, and winter meetings start as we record this on Friday, December 2nd. The 4th, they're going to start flying into Washington, I should say. And the 5th really kicks it off. So, next week we might have a really action-packed show depending upon who's going where and what goes on at the winter meetings.
Yeah, it's hard to believe they're already here. And as you said, Gary, some of those big pickups are still out there. Some have already been made, as the Mets found out. You had a little early Christmas present there.
Yeah, Mets signed Yoenis Cespedes to a 4-year deal, $110 million. And we're very happy here in New York with that deal. And, of course, some trades have already taken place with the Yankees sending Brian McCann, their catcher, to Houston for a couple of young prospects and players. So there's been some activity. Phillies made some moves, made a couple of trades there of players. So there's been some activity, but I think with the CBA looming, a lot of people held back, and that's why this winter meeting could be even more exciting this year. I mean, like 2 years ago, and even last year, there was a lot of activity 2 years ago, and some activity last year. This year could be like 2 years ago. It could be a ton of activity because now the cork is out of the bottle and they're ready to deal and trade, and it's I think it's going to be interesting. Hopefully it doesn't disappoint. We'll see what happens as time goes on.
Yes, indeed. And of course, the baseball's 2016 winter meetings being held just outside of Washington, D.C. in National Harbor, Maryland, at the Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Just in a couple of days, I believe December 5th, we're going to find out the Baseball Hall of Fame class for 2017. It's going to be unveiled officially. And we have some, a 16-member Today's Game Era committee will meet the day before that to vote on 10 candidates for the Hall of Fame from the old timers as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens this year. See if some of those guys that have been on the fringe with that steroid type of cloud, so to speak, move up and possibly get picked into the Hall of Fame. Still not too sure if that would ever happen, but they do have a few more years of eligibility. So it's going to be interesting to see where baseball goes with that as well.
And of course, there'll be a couple of big names that are added on. Among the most prominent this year are going to be Vladimir Guerrero, Pudge Rodriguez, and Manny Ramirez. And of course, as you were mentioning, guys that were on the fringe: Jeff Bagwell, Tim Raines, Trevor Hoffman, Kurt Schilling. It'll be interesting to see how their vote totals go up. If not, they make it completely. I don't think any of the new guys is going to go in their first year. Guerrero, Rodriguez, or Ramirez. Ramirez, of course, great hitter, but kind of a whack job, and got suspended a couple of times for drugs. So don't know if he's going to make it. I would imagine Guerrero would eventually get in. Pudge Rodriguez, he's going to have to get in on his defense because he's He was a 296 hitter, but not, you know what I mean? Not the great Hall of Fame numbers you might think. And look, it took him 3 or 4 attempts to get Mike Piazza in, and Rodriguez had the same kind of rumors surrounding him about the drugs. So we'll see, but I would not be surprised if Bagwell, maybe Raines and Hoffman get in this season. They were very, very close last year. I'm not. I'd have to look at Tim Raines' number. I don't know if I consider him as a Hall of Fame guy, really, but Hoffman had the most saves, so whether you like it or not, he should be somewhere in there. And you know, there's another guy that should be in the Hall of Fame and not even getting sniffing close, and that's John Franco. And I know he's an ex-Met, an ex-Cincinnati guy, but I think he is has the most saves by a left-handed pitcher in the history of baseball. And how he's not even getting a consideration or never got a consideration is beyond me. I don't know how you put in somebody that's going to have less saves than him and put them in, and yet he gets overlooked. It just kind of boggles my mind a little bit. But who knows what criteria they use in that aspect? But he never got I don't even think he's on the ballot anymore. But I think that's kind of a shame right there. That it came up because I think last year they were considering some other relief pitcher. Oh, they were talking about the former Philly and Met and
Billy Wagner.
Yeah, Billy Wagner. They were talking about him, and his numbers are less than John Franco, more or less. I mean, he's got some better numbers, but he doesn't have as many saves. So how could you put somebody in with less saves than the all-time left-handed relief pitching leader and not even give him a sniff? So I don't know, but I look at I don't know. Biggio had some great numbers, but I never would have considered him a Hall of Famer either. But he's in, so I guess Bagwell will probably go again. Tim Raines, I think this is his last shot to get in. And Trevor Hoffman had 67%. You got to get to 75, so he's very close as well. So we'll see when the vote comes out.
Yeah, and I think you're pretty well right on with Tim Raines. He's sort of on that edge, whether or not he would be a Hall of Famer. If you go to baseballreference.com, they have a great Hall of Fame statistics type of setup there where they measure certain players, and he's just on that fringe of being a Hall of Fame player. Now, if the voting went where they couldn't agree on other players, then I think you might see a guy like Raines get in. He is compared to other players that are in the Hall of Fame, namely Lou Brock, a guy named Fred Clark, people like that. But I don't think he gets in if there's a big competition with other players to get in. He did have a long career, 23-year career. Seemed like he played forever. Doesn't it? You always remember certain players for that. They hang around forever, and so you never know. I mean, as you said, it's his last year. Maybe that will have an impact with some voters if they feel that he's on that fringe. But yeah, it's certainly not an exact science with the Hall of Fame either. Some players get in that don't necessarily you wouldn't expect them to get in, and other players that you would expect get in don't get in. So everybody can't go into a Hall of Fame, and it's just a certain select few. And sometimes the ball just bounces in your court, and you go with it.
I don't know if it's age or what, but I guess when I was a kid, the Hall of Fame had guys like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, and these guys were really like legends, Ty Cobb and all of that. And I guess maybe to a younger guy today, Tim Raines might be a legend of the game. But I mean, I don't know. Growing up and following baseball in the '60s, you kind of knew that Willie Mays was going to go into the Hall of Fame. This guy was a superstar. You knew Mickey Mantle was a superstar. Juan Marichal, Sandy Koufax. You just knew it, how great they were. I don't know if when I look at these guys' names, and I don't really see that level of legendary figuredom, if you will. You know, I don't know if I'm making myself clear here, but I don't, and I don't know if it's because of age. Maybe I'm just prejudiced towards the older, the legendary guys, but I don't. I guess it's unfair to say Jeff Bagwell and Babe Ruth are in the Hall of Fame, because when you take Bagwell and Ruth, there's no comparison.
Yeah, I never was a Jeff Bagwell for the Hall of Fame type of fan at all. He had a good career, but certainly not what I would consider a Hall of Fame type of career.
Yeah,
And again, the numbers spell it out sometimes. If you look at his baseballreference.com page, the numbers seem to gel with being a Hall of Fame type of player. And maybe we missed some of those years that could have construed him as that type of player. But you know, more than anything, I think it's a numbers game as well as a popularity type of contest as well.
Well, and I think the sabermetrics now are playing a part of all of that, because they take numbers and they can come up with these WAR and WHIP and all of these things, and they say, see, that puts him as one of the greatest of all time. But I don't think it does, because I don't. To me, it's the eye test, and the eye test wasn't there. Was he a great ball player? Yeah, but so was Jimmy Wynn. I mean, he was some hitter too, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. And it's just it's a complex issue. Because I don't see any. There are very few guys nowadays, even playing now. Now, I would point to a guy like Mike Trout is a Hall of Famer if he keeps playing the way he is. The start that he's off to, if he avoids injuries, he's a Hall of Famer, hands down. He's this generation's Mickey Mantle, without a doubt. I mean, I don't think you can offer it. Is Bryce Harper? No, I don't think he's as consistent. He's still young. He can put together a 10 consistent years. He'll be in the Hall of Fame. And I would agree with that. But right now, I don't think he is at roughly the same spot in their career. Trout's a couple years older, I think, or a year or two. Trout's a Hall of Famer in my estimation right now, but he's got to continue to do it. I'm not saying put him in right now. What I'm saying is, the way with his numbers so far, if he continues like this, he's a Hall of Famer, without doubt.
I think his numbers would qualify him if he keeps playing even 75% of what he's done in the past few years, in just two, maybe 3 seasons tops before he's 30. He's going to be like like you said, your Mickey Mantle of the era.
Right.
No comparison. And he's a very humble player as well. That's the interesting thing about him. As of right now, he's very down to earth, humble, and maybe that's part of his success. He hasn't let this go to his head, it doesn't seem, and he's just having fun playing baseball. Of course, he'd probably like to win, being on a winning team, but for right now, he's just having a fun time and playing very well.
But I guess my point is, you don't see a lot of there aren't a lot of him around. I mean, like I said, Bryce Harper maybe, but Bryce Harper is kind of inconsistent. He's up and down. Chris Bryant, well, he's only been in 2 years. You can't give him a Hall of Fame. And really, he's had nice numbers, but not, we're talking with Trout at 330. 35 home runs, 100 plus RBIs for, I don't know what Bryant's numbers were this year, but I don't think he hit 300. I don't know how many home runs he hit, 25. Yeah, he was the MVP. Yes, he won Rookie of the Year, but I want to see more from him. But you just don't see dominating guys like that anymore. I don't. Kershaw maybe, but I have to look at his playoff record, and that kind of is so. Bumgarner, great in the playoffs, but his regular season record is so. I just don't see it. But I do want to see people get in, and there probably are some guys that are deserving, and I think Hoffman had the most saves. He should be in. Whether he did it, because he hung around, he still had to have something left if teams kept him around, and he was able to save that many games and to save it with some bad teams. So I think that should play into it as well. So I can see him getting in. I don't know. I was never a Bagwell fan. Tim Raines, terrific ball player, Hall of Famer, legendary. I don't know. Even Ozzie Smith, I don't, he's in the Hall of Fame for his glove, but should he be there? But, this is an argument that they've had for ages. There are guys in the Hall of Fame that Candy Cummings got in because he invented the curveball, supposedly. Does he really belong there? Probably not. But there's a lot of politics that get involved with some of these older players as well. And these veteran guys voted him in. So, but it brings up good conversations and something to argue about. And somebody can email me if they don't like it at Gary@baseballtalkradio.com.
And tell them what you really feel.
Tell them what I really.
But getting back to Mike Trout, as you said, that's been some interesting reading this offseason. Articles about certain teams, should they make a play for him? Will the Angels even consider trading him? Certain players, Bryce Harper for Mike Trout. I read that the other day somewhere. It's just amazing. The Yankees were mentioned in trade rumors for Mike Trout, what they'd have to give up. Even the Cubs, I was reading some articles today. If the Cubs could get Mike Trout. Now, if the Cubs ever got Mike Trout, I think I would just close the book on baseball because they would win it for the next 3 years, probably.
I don't think so. You still got to pitch and you still got to play the games. And I don't think it's going to be tougher for them this year because now they're getting rich and happy off of all of this, or fat and happy, or whatever you want to call it. So they're going to have a tough time this season. I think. I don't think they're going to repeat, or if they do, it's not going to be as easy as it was last year. My Mets are going to be there. Mark my word.
You heard it here on December 2nd, 2016.
If the Mets pitching staff can stay healthy, they will win the division and win the World Series this season.
Very good. Well, you heard it here first from Gary Mack. Of course, we'll be working this off season on all of our picks coming up probably in March or so, our MLB pick show again, and looking forward to that. And Gary, this show is whizzed by like it always does. Always great to do the show. Always look forward to doing it. We try to cover as much as we can for the listeners, and we hope everybody enjoyed this one.
And everybody have a great week, and we'll see you the next time.